So, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Chelsea and Warren Dock. Chelsea is a 12-year-old piano player and child prodigy. And I'm going to bring Donna Ford into the conversation. So, she's a professor of education at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. She studies gifted African American and minority children. Hey, Donna.
Hello.
Hi,
So,
Donna.
when you
Hi.
when you're listening to Chelsea and Warren talk, I asked Warren a little bit about whether or not it ever throws the family off to have someone who's constantly going to competitions, and he's told us no, that they all work together as a team. But does that ever happen when you have one kid who has a specific talent? Does it ever kind of throw families off?
I think it really depends on the relationship that family members have with each other and family dynamics. So, in some families, it can work well, and in other families, it might not work well. I think it also depends on the age of the child. One of the things Warren mentioned was that I think he said three of the children were older, and so there's less likely to be as much competition with a child who's younger. There's more likely to instead be support.
People use different words: gifted, prodigy, genius. What do those terms really mean on a practical level, and are they interchangeable or do they mean different things to you?
They mean different things to me. Gifted is at the heart of both being a child prodigy and a genius. So, for example, if you're gifted, it means that you perform. That gift or talent is well above someone else of the same age, experience, and background. When I think of genius, I think more of someone who is intellectually more advanced or academically more advanced. When I think of prodigy, I think of someone who's much more advanced in terms of visual and performing arts, like playing a musical instrument, voice, dance, chess, and things of that nature. So again, there is a fine difference, but there is a difference.
You were yourself identified as gifted as a child. What were the pros and cons of that?
Socially, there were a lot of cons, I'm sorry. In other words, there's a lot of peer pressure and teasing and jealousy and envy when I, recall my childhood experiences. But there are also positives because you have higher teacher expectations. Parents seem to have higher expectations for you. You seem to, do better in the long run academically and professionally. So being gifted and talented, and I think you said this earlier, every gift and talent comes with some kind of challenge. And, parents and educators really have to work with students to make sure that those challenges don't hold a child back, that instead we're able to nurture the gifts and talents that individual has.
Chelsea, when you go to school and then also when you go out on the road for competitions and dates, do you often find yourself being the only kid of color in certain situations? I mean, are you looking around now and sort of seeing how race plays out with this? And are you, what do you think about diversity within the kind of work that you do as a pianist?
Well, like when I go out, I usually don't see many minorities or like African American or Hispanic, whatever. Um, I don't know why, because maybe they don't feel like they could do it because they see these other people of different nationality. But I'm starting to notice that if I really show, I can I can influence other kids into trying to pursue this, whether Asian, Hispanic, African American, Caucasian, whatever.
Warren, how do you deal with the diversity issue within what your daughter does?
Well, the most difficult part I have with this is that the discrimination that she has to deal with, being an African American playing classical music. Uh, that's a serious problem, and also I have a problem with getting the African American community to recognize Chelsea, whereas the other communities in the media have embraced Chelsea by putting her on TV. And you know, you think about the Nashville situation. That's the #1 country event where any country artist would you know, dream of performing at. Where Chelsea had the opportunity to perform there, the Ellen Show. I mean, she's performed at Madison Square Garden, you know, probably about 7 or 8 times. But when trying to reach out to the African American community to let them know that we have a child prodigy, you know, such as a Philippe Schuler, that we should introduce to our children, I'm having a very difficult time.
I wanted to,
Please.
first of all, commend Chelsea for trying to bring other people along and be a role model.
Thank
And
you.
I also want to, you're welcome. I also want to reinforce what both of them have said, and that is that there are very few minority students, especially African American students, identified as gifted. And so in Chelsea's situation, she is less likely to see an African American who is not just able to play the piano well, but even in school, you're less likely to see African Americans be identified as gifted, or if they're at the high school level, to participate in advanced placement classes.
Do you think
meaning
that's because there are not gifted children or because they're not identified?
every group has individuals at a comparable rate who are gifted, and I really want that to be clear. The problem is too often African American students are not identified as gifted. We are underrepresented in gifted programs by almost 50%. In other words, African American students represent about 17% of the school population, but only about 9% of students who've been identified as gifted. So that's close to 50% underrepresentation. The number one way to be identified as gifted is for a teacher to refer you. And at this point, African Americans are the group least likely to be identified as gifted. And then secondly, after you've been referred, you take a test. And depending on what test is chosen, you may not do well. So there are a number of variables, but I want to reiterate that every group, no group has a monopoly on being gifted and talented. African Americans are equally gifted and talented as other groups.
Chelsea,
Just not identified.
exactly. Chelsea, you have accomplished so much at such a young age, and you don't seem like the kind of person who's really setting yourself up to just coast. So what do you want to do in the next 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years?
Well, being that I'm only 12, I'm not quite sure yet. But all
That's
I know,
fair.
Yeah, but all I know is that it's gonna involve music.
You love it. And Warren, what do you think about that?
Well, I support her. You know, I've always told her, you know, because I support her academically as well, because she is an A student. And so she's always been an A student. And what Donna was saying was right. They give you these exams to take, and depending on what type of exam it is, depends upon what type of academic situation you can get yourself involved in. But I've always told Chelsea, whatever she wants to do, I'm there to support her. You know, if any time she feels that the music is getting too stressful, you know, we can just do something else. But I know this is something that I just feel it's something she's born to do, and she feels the same way. So I'm just here to support her in any way that I can.
All right.
I like to applaud, I like to applaud you, Warren, for what you just said. In other words, I think sometimes, not always, but sometimes parents can place too much emphasis on that child's gift and talent, and they become obsessed with it.
Absolutely.
And that's about the only thing they appreciate. But when you are able to back off and relax and give Chelsea some options, meaning she's a prodigy at this, but if she loses interest in it, then perhaps it's okay. And then for her to be academically gifted, or at least performing well academically, she has a lot to fall back on.
All
So
right,
that's just one of several strengths.
All right, we have to wrap it up, but this has been a great conversation. I want to thank Donna Ford, Professor of Education at Vanderbilt University, and she joined us from the studios at Vanderbilt, also talking to Chelsea Dock and her father, Warren Dock.